You know, it never ceases to amaze me every time I see the Aleph Tav used with other Hebrew letters as a prefix, just how dynamic the meaning of the sentence is enhanced in regard to the working of the Yah-head once you investigate the meaning of that Hebrew letter. It only seems to confirm again and again just how shallow the English translation sometimes actually is, and confirms the depth and the richness of the Hebrew language, and why it is a must for us to study the meaning of each Hebrew letter if we truly wish to gain a more comprehensive meaning of what the authors were trying to express. This holds true with any Hebrew word, for that matter, and reminds me of Paul's statement in Romans 11:33, which states, "Oh, the depth of the riches, both of the wisdom and knowledge of Elohim. How unsearchable are his judgments, and his ways past finding out." Also Peter, who states that these are things which angels desire to look into. So with that preface, let's look at the association of the Hebrew letter Mem as a prefix to the Aleph Tav. The Mem-Aleph Tav word is used only a total of 135 times in the Tanakh. The Hebrew word is generally translated into the English word from or come, and the Hebrew letter Mem is actually describing a flow of something. And this English translation is actually pretty close to the original Paleo-Hebrew meaning. Please understand, there are other ways to spell from or come in Hebrew. So when the writer combined the Aleph Tav symbol with the Hebrew letter Mem, he was definitely speaking of a flow pertaining to something divine from the Yah-head. The proof of this is where we find the Mem-Aleph Tav word used. An example is in Genesis 19, verse 24, which states, "And Yahuwah rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire, Mem-Aleph Tav, Yahuwah, out of heaven," implying that the judgment of Sodom and Gomorrah of brimstone and fire flowed down from both the Aleph Tav and Yahuwah, the Father, the Yah-head, the two working together as one in association to carrying out Father's divine will and judgment. Then there is the Bet-Aleph Tav word, used only 10 times in the entire Tanakh, usually translated into English as "you come" or "you came." There are other ways to write these words in Hebrew. So consequently, when we see the Bet-Aleph Tav word, the deeper meaning points to the Yah-head coming or moving and accomplishing something. In Paleo-Hebrew, the Hebrew letter Bet could have meant several things, but primarily it seemed to have something to do with being inside of or within, something such as a house. But when used as a prefix with the Aleph Tav, it seems in regard to the Yah-head bringing us inside of or within his presence. An example of this is the blessing Boaz speaks to Ruth in Ruth chapter 2, verse 12, which states, "May Yahuwah recompense your work, and a full reward be given to you of Yahuwah, the Elohim of Israel, whom Bet-Aleph Tav, to trust under his wings." This word seems to imply that through the working of the Aleph Tav, Ruth came into trusting the Yah-head. You will find many examples of this in the Messianic Aleph Tav scriptures. But one possible exception to this I found concerning Hagar, Abraham's wife, Sarah's handmaid. Now let me set the stage. Amazingly, the only time an Aleph Tav appears in front of Hagar's name is when she is given to Abraham as a wife to produce an offspring in Genesis 16:3, which states, "And after Abram had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, took Sarai, wife of Abram, Aleph Tav, Hagar, her Egyptian maid, and gave her to her husband Abram to be his wife." Now, only 5 verses later, we see the first and only Bet-Aleph Tav word used in the entire Torah, and it is in association with Hagar as some kind of title. Genesis 16:8 states, "And he said to Hagar, Sarah's maid, From where have Bet-Aleph Tav, and where are you going?" Now it is so blatant, obvious, that just as in the story of Ruth, where Ruth has no Aleph Tavs in front of her name until she is wed to Boaz, the same applies here to Hagar, with the first Aleph Tav appearing in front of her name when she is wed to Abram. And now, 5 verses later, Moses has Abram addressing Hagar as a Bet-Aleph Tav, which is erroneously translated in English as the word you, because there's probably no equivalent meaning of the word in English. Now, I don't know about you, but when I find this type of illustration in the Hebrew text, it becomes very fascinating, especially when a word is only used once in the entire Torah. I mean, what was Moses trying to convey by using the Hebrew letter bet as a prefix to the Aleph Tav in relationship to Hagar? I submit to you that Moses is somehow honoring Hagar by this word in the Hebrew text. And the reason I say that is because not only are there other Hebrew words that are interpreted as you in English that Moses could have used, but anytime the Aleph Tav is used in a word, it becomes very special. I'll give you a case in point. The English word him can be translated from Hebrew several different ways, but the Hebrew word Aleph Tav Vav, which is always translated as either him or with him, is used only 595 times in the entire Tanakh, and only in regard to a male who is in covenant with the Yah-head. To put that into perspective, the English word him is used a total of over 4,200 times in the entire Tanakh. So obviously, in comparison, anytime we see the Aleph Tav in a Hebrew word, there's always going to be a special attachment of some kind to the Yah-head to condone the author's use of the character symbol in the Hebrew text, and thus giving substantial credibility that the Aleph Tav symbol had a profound meaning in relationship to the Yah-head. All we have to do is simply look at the evidence. I'm Bill Sanford, trying to put the Aleph Tav in proper perspective in our day. Shalom.